So Method NA, 40K. First matchup we have coming up onto this. Very surprising here, Nagura, to start seeing both of these teams in the lower quarters really early on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was talking to Saronic before the show, and I was asking him, what's the first game? He said Method NA versus 40K, and I was like, no, isn't it the lower bracket first? And he's like, yeah, it's the lower bracket. It's like, oh, wait. Oh, yeah, true, they're in the lower bracket. It's so weird to see both of those teams just being in the lower bracket so early on. But, of course, Method NA playing against Method U very early, and 40K losing to, I believe, it was Pain for a Fan they lost to, right? So that's that there. For sure, as I said, they were the favorites to win that game. But of course, there's a lower bracket, so one of those teams will be eliminated. Interesting to see who's going to win.
Yeah, I can't wait to start seeing that. So King's Rest is going to be our first map as well. And there's been a little bit of rebalancing on that one, Titles.
Yeah, so some of the trash count and the overall dungeon count that is actually required for King's Rest actually got a little bit of a change coming into the season. I know some of the Colossi end up giving more count relative to the overall count that is required for the dungeon. So it'll be interesting to see how some of the teams end up pulling. I know last MDI we had this meta where you would actually pull those Colossi into the gauntlet area. So we're definitely going to be seeing what teams end up doing coming into this King's Rest match.
Right, you are, Titles. If you'd like to place your vote on who you think is going to be taking this series, be sure to vote right now with hashtag MNA or hashtag 40K as we get ourselves started in King's Rest.
And, you know, just to kind of extend what Titles was saying there, the Colossi as well have now changed their mechanic for that front, which makes it a lot easier. Now only targets the tank, so if the entire team gets cleaved, it is the tank's fault, which is weird because that's never the case when it comes to me when I play with Jack. But, Nagura, also to note about this dungeon, bursting skittish, not really a big deal. I can think of maybe 2 spots in the dungeon where bursting is dangerous, of course, with these minions of Zul, which are being skipped at the beginning anyway, so really just the next ones in the room, and skittish, complete non-factor.
Yeah, definitely. Skittish is not really a big deal, especially if you have 2 rogues and this Prot Warrior who is so tanky, can just stay in and do a lot of damage, maintaining that aggro. Lacelle actually going down for 40k here, not managing to do the skip properly, so definitely already a big mistake really at the very start. Not only do you lose the 5 seconds, you also lose the buff food, and you need to take the time to get the rest back up. So Method NA already in the lead here from the very get-go. There's some other nerfs also that happen in the dungeon, considering the bosses, but we'll talk about it later once we reach them.
Yeah, I mean, that was unfortunate with Lacelle. That's 5 seconds on the clock already. You can see that Shadow Melt cooldown is running, so it just didn't manage to get it off as intended there. Both teams just doing a pretty substantial pull here. We are in a Tides-heavy dungeon as far as the beguiling affix goes right now, meaning there's going to be several emissaries of Tides present throughout the dungeon in much higher quantity than the other 2. Tides, again, just to remind those at home, since we're in that new affix, are the ones that prevent any form of interrupt or crowd control around their surrounding enemy mobs. So it could be quite dangerous for these Witch Doctors here. As you can see, they just free cast on the tank. You can line of sight the Shadow Bolt volley, but you have to be really careful when doing so.
Yeah, one more thing to note here is that both of those teams pulling a little bit slower than what we are used to in the spring season, but that's obviously because we have Fortified now. Well, throughout the whole spring season, we did have Tyrannical in King's Rest, making all the bosses more difficult and allowing those teams to do those huge trash pulls where they would just pull the whole room, all 4 packs together. Now with Fortified and Bursting, of course that gets a lot more difficult, so we see the teams pull a little bit slower, but they still pull 2 packs together, which is still difficult if you have 2 Witch Doctors which need to be constantly interrupted.
Yeah, I mean, just don't have enough interrupts for 2 Witch Doctors with the Deathly Chill, so they're gonna leak some. Even with that Spell Reflect, that's only 1 technical interrupt there, so a lot of damage is gonna keep coming in on the tank, as unfortunately they're getting clipped on the side of Rentari here for 40k, getting clipped by some of those gales going off. You can see that blue gust debuff on the players. Lozelle Lofus follows suit as well, as Lighty takes a bit of chunk damage now. Nerf tank just dipping below 50%, nothing that JB can handle as they look to finish the rest of the trash before the Golden Serpent comes out as the first boss for the dungeon, which, as we mentioned earlier, has received a small but quite significant nerf in some ways as well, Nagura.
Yeah, definitely. So the debuff, the gold that gets applied to a random player that is not a tank, does a lot less damage now, so definitely easier to heal. I mean, it's also a fortified setting, so it would have been easier in the first place, but with the nerf, makes Tyrannical a little bit easier as well, because we know how much the healers always struggled on this boss to keep the people alive with this debuff. It was just doing a little bit too much damage, so the nerf definitely warranted.
Well, that's of course not available to the teams as they popped it earlier in this heavy fortified setting right now. Both starting here on the Golden Serpent as we reach 80% for Method NA, 40k just getting started, hitting that 90% mark with whatever cooldowns they have available to them. Rentari not yet popped Avatar, looks like, just waiting likely for the first gust before doing so. 40k just a bit behind here. Now, keep in mind, of course, those ooey gooey rich and chewies on the side aren't too dangerous, but Method and A actually combining the two constructs from the beginning that in Season 2 the meta was kind of to grab these during the gauntlet after the first boss. Method and A said, you know what, it's fortified. It's not a big deal, but Nerf Tank goes down, so pretty big deal here as the Battle Res comes up, tries to salvage the pull, but he only has one taunt available. He can reset it with Heroic Leap, but there's 3 mobs, so they're going to need to be careful where these suppression slams are pointed right now as he grabs aggro. Yoda, unfortunately, still eating a bit to the face and gets that cheat death proc too, so Method and A looking a bit shaky as they try to get themselves and recompose here for the pull.
Yeah, it seems like those Guardians, because Nerf Tank went down, just are, aggroing other players. They're just walking around in random places. And with this frontal cone, even though they changed it to only target the tank, if they're running around all over the place, it's still very difficult to dodge for the melee. So now they seem to have recovered it at this point on Method and A's side. But this pull seems more difficult than it seemed at the very start after all, because we do have the 45, so of course those Guardians do have a lot of HP. And it makes sense for them to pull it on top of the boss instead of the gauntlet later, because if the gauntlet is buffed by 45, it's definitely not as easy as it was before.
Important to note as well, at least for our tank buddies out there, Rentari, unlike actually most of the tanks that we saw yesterday, is actually not running double defensive trinket, so he's not running the heal over time trinket, essentially the Urchin from Lady Ashby. He's opting to run Goring Crusted block, which gives you that extra crit rating on procs, something that Nerf Tank is not. And it's weird, because Nerf's known to love his offense. He's known to just get as much damage in on groups as possible, so it's interesting to see him going a bit more defensive here than Rentari. Nonetheless, 40k, both teams have actually finished the boss off now. 40k, of course, a bit behind trash percentage just because they did not do that dangerous construct pull, but I do expect that they're going to combine it into this gauntlet likely, like we saw in Season 2.
Yeah, we'll see how difficult it's going to be for 40k if they pull those constructs on top of this gauntlet, because again, it's 45 now, so this gauntlet not as easy as it seems. You can see everyone drop really low here, and the Guardians actually arriving here, so they did pull them, but we'll see how they manage, because again, 45, this gauntlet definitely not as easy. There's a bunch of named mobs that are definitely dangerous if you don't deal with their mechanics properly.
A lot of damage coming in for damage over time from the bursting, of course, for 40k right now. Unfortunately, Igloo gets his Undulating Tides procced. We do know that that new Azurite trait is basically a dead trait. If you proc it after 45 seconds, you cannot reproc it. It just gives you single target damage and gives you an absorb shield should you dip below 50% HP. So we can see that debuff right now on Igloo. We can also see, of course, the HOTS rolling, kind of a new feature that we're trying out here for the viewers at home. You can see the healing over time effects rolling on the side of Method and A right now. Whenever the healer is targeted, JB, we can see is targeted right now, so we can see just how good the coverage is during a heavy bursting scenario.
Yeah, one thing to note, I think the 40k strategy where they actually pull the Guardians on top of the gauntlet is saving them more time, just because there's actual downtime in between the mobs spawning, and therefore you have free DPS. While Method and A definitely was slower on the first boss because they were having those Guardians on top. So it seems like 40k's strategy is more efficient if they can pull it off, and they're doing a really good job so far. You see the marks on the captain and on the named mobs here, just because there's so many things they need to interrupt. With the whirlwind axis that needs to be interrupted, and also the lightning AoE that also needs to be knocked with Lascelles Ring of Peace or Resto Igloo's Techno.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Nagara. It seems like that was a strategy to bring the Colossi into the Gauntlet Room that was already pretty superior. It seemed like it wasn't really necessary to try and combine it with something else. It's just a lot of danger with that first boss, and it almost actually ended up wiping Method and A. Fortunately, they were able to recover as they are working on the next part of their Gauntlet right now with Queen Wasi and, of course, the King on the side that does a quite horrendous Whirlwind Blade Storm that damages melee immensely, especially in these heavy melee comps. You have to be really careful to move away quickly for that. They await the final one, of course, the Archer. She does a lot of damage while the Raptor jumps around. We've seen it a million times here. 40k just now finishing up Queen Wasi and King Tamalji.
Yeah, you actually saw the mind control that happens on the Queen and the King here that actually cannot be dispelled by anyone, because they don't have any offensive dispels in their team composition and their alliance, of course, so they don't have this Blood Elf racial to remove it either, so they just have to stand through the mind control. Usually it's not a big deal, but sometimes if there's any other ability overlapping with the mind control, it can be dangerous, but both teams managed to survive it just fine, while Method and A is already on this last pack, so Method and A pulling slightly ahead here.
Yeah, they have pulled slightly ahead, and both teams, the only advantage Fourty really has right now is they have their battle res available, but within about 2 minutes, Method and A should have theirs up too, and there's nothing too dangerous happening until they start to enter the gooey room of Machimba, the second boss, which we'll have after this Tides combo with the Construct, but we have seen that typically this is skipped in Season 2, and once again, they are wasting no time by skipping right past that. Just not really efficient to cleave down that high health Construct as they head over into the next room, and usually there's a pretty substantial pull in this room. There's nothing also too dangerous by having the Tides in here. There's nothing you need to interrupt. There's nothing you really need to crowd control. So they're just going to combine both emissaries of the Tides. Huge pull coming in here for Method and A right now as they like to eke out as much damage as they can, but they have to be really careful to control the bursting at the end of this.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting to see how they're going to deal with the bursting. Now, of course, they do have the rogues who can finish off this pull, which is probably what's going to happen. Yeah, you see all the people who cannot immune are just running away, while the rogues, Shakib and Yoda, are just going to finish off this pack while cloaking off the debuff. You can see 14 bursting stacks on Shakib when he used his cloak, and there we go. They finished off the pack. Very well done by Method and A, and everyone else was just outranging the bursting.
Nice and clean. Interesting on the side of Fourty, though, they've actually combined those with one of the constructs too, so we can see Igloo running away just to outrange the bursting right now. Doesn't manage to do so though, and Prox is undulating Tides as well. A lot of damage coming in the group. Huge amount of healing over time on himself, Lizelle, and Rentari to make sure they stabilize, which they do. That was a close call, but no death on the board for Fourty from that pretty aggressive pull.
Yeah, that was very, very well done by Igloo. He didn't manage to outrange it, but he still managed to keep everyone alive while having this many stacks. You saw, of course, Lizelle and Igloo popping all of their defensives to be able to survive the 9 stacks, I believe, that were on Igloo. Now, Method and A already on the boss here. They pulled the boss with the construct. So this is actually very dangerous because you get the entomb from the boss, and you also get the constructs putting you into one of those things on the side, so you gotta make sure that you get them out immediately before the boss cast, but they seem to be doing a very good job as they're just running around. Now, we talked about this before, how efficient it is to pull mobs on top of a boss, and it seemed to be, on paper, it seemed to be more efficient, but when we actually saw the teams pulling trash on top of bosses, they ended up being much slower, so we'll see if it works out for Method and A here.
Truthfully, these constructs don't do much though, so it's not too bad to have them on top. However, you will lose some damage because they inevitably will port one of the players to one of the sarcophagi on the side there, and one of the tombs to make sure that they get trapped and start pulsing AoE. So JB has to run around and free them, and just the travel time alone is a bit of a DPS loss, but hopefully worth it for them. As once again, Fourty has started on Machimba. Interesting to see if they're going to use their Bloodlust here as well. 2 different strats coming out in the past season, in Season 2 that is, where we either had Bloodlust popped on Machimba right away to try to chew through the health, or of course we had it for trash. Now, being in a fortified environment and knowing the danger that's coming on the bridge with the Berserkers I would expect that both teams hold on to their Bloodlust, and it looks like they're doing just that. Machimba now 25% for Method and A, 64% for Fourty. They're just starting to pull slightly more and more ahead. Nothing too substantial yet, Nagura, but they're paving their way to just keep pulling away from Fourty here.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a big lead because, again, it's 45, so the boss HP difference does not mean as much as if it was tyrannical. But still, I think the biggest lead they got from Method and A was when they were in this gauntlet area, and Fourty was still dealing with the constructs, and therefore they were dealing with the gauntlet a little bit slower compared to Method and A. So maybe it still was paying off for Method and A to pull them on top of the first boss. It seemed like it was more efficient for them. But now we see a pretty crucial pull. At least it was a crucial pull in the spring season. Now, of course, they're probably going to be go a little bit slower than we were used to seeing, just because it's fortified, of course.
Yes, the old spell reflect on 2 mobs at the same time with the Hex Priest, a nice trick from Prot Warriors that they do there to pull them at the exact same time. Wanting to cleave everything, we can already see that there is an Emissary of Tides hanging out in the room just beyond this. Certainly not something you want to pull with the Hex Priests, as they will just, you can't interrupt not only their Hex, but the Spectral Bolt as well that does an immense amount of damage on the tank. Fourty wasting no time to rush upstairs right now and try to keep close to Method and A. They're 3% behind on trash, of course, because Method and A has cleared this first very dangerous pull. Fourty just now getting started as a Shroud actually comes up from Method and A, opting to skip the combo of the Emissary of Tides along with the Beastmaster and going straight towards the Enchanted Emissary. It looks like they're actually going to double Shroud here as the blind comes up, second layer of Shroud comes, and they actually pull one of the middle packs of the bridge later on.
Yeah, so 40k actually popping their Bloodlust here, doing a pretty big pull. So they not only pulled the first pack, but they also pulled some of the trash further on, while also rooting the Emissary of Tides here. So popping their Bloodlust to be able to finish off this pack. We see the bleed of the Berserkers being handled pretty well as well. Mostly is the non-tanks who are taking the bleed from the Berserkers to be able to have Rentari be tankier and get the rest of the mobs. So very well done by 40k to do this huge pull, while Mythic Dungeon is doing a pretty big pull themselves after using this Double Shroud.
Double Shroud indeed. It looks like they just tried to get in the middle of the bridge and then collapse everything black hole style right on top of them with surrounding groups. That's exactly what they're doing there. As 40k only uses one Shroud here. We'll see if they deal with the Enchanted Emissary as well. Again, reminder for the Beguiling, the Enchanted Emissary does reflect all damage of any members within that aura. Looks like they stopped just short of that. They're skipping the Berserker, or the Hulk rather, and they're just dealing with the Beastmaster pull before they move further down the bridge. Igloo unfortunately getting clipped and actually proccing his Ashara staff. That's a 10-minute cooldown, so that's an immense amount of healing and damage that I can do. So he's not really going to have that available for the rest of the dungeon, something that healers try to hold on to so that they can build charges and have just an immense numerical hit essentially, or nuke by the end of the dungeon. So not good for Igloo. Advantage there for JB as they are cleaning up now the rest of the bridge.
Yeah, so if you look at the percentage, Method and A pretty far ahead at this point, because not only do they have more percentage right now, they're also about to finish off a bunch more mobs, and therefore going to be even further ahead. So Method and A definitely establishing their lead here as they're on their way to the third boss, the Council boss. Now we talked about the Council boss a lot because there was a very difficult mechanic to deal with those axes, the debuff that gets applied to one of the players by one of the bosses, but it actually got nerfed as well, so that should not be a problem anymore, especially on a fortified setting.
Especially in a fortified setting. Rentari, I gasped there because Rentari, as we were talking, just to 2% HP with that Berserker bleed on him, and then he got a Frost Shock from the Witch Doctor nearby, but managed to survive as Method and A aggressively pulls a Berserker down on top of Kula the Butcher, so a lot of damage that can come in on the group. We see a bleed already present on Nerf the tank. Method is really aggressive with their pulls in this King's Rest. I like to see this trash combination with the bosses. I don't think it was really worth on the Golden Serpent, just because you're going to get those two constructs in anyways at the Gauntlet, but the rest of it has been great, and it's really just allowing them to pull further and further ahead. Struggles here for 40k, though, as Rentari dips to 5% health. A lot of damage coming in, and Igloo just having not an easy time here trying to heal him up and keep him present. You could see all the rows of defensives and healing over time effects on Rentari right now just to try to keep him alive as he gets more Berserker bleeds bursting on top of it, and a poison on the group right now. So much damage needing to come in on the group, and only 2 people can dispel that poison. They got to be careful where they point that frontal. Method and A, no problem though, already cleaning up Kula and getting ready for the second boss.
Yeah, I think they had some. Lovis actually going down here for 40k as he had the poison debuff on him. No one was able to dispel that debuff, so him going down after proccing the cheat death. I think they had a problem with the setup here as one of the casters in the back, Lovis going down again by the Raptor jumping there, so they do have one more battle rest, but they should be able to just save it and get it off later. Never mind, they're using it, getting Lovis up to be faster, so they're out of battle rest at this point.
I think they heard you and they just wanted to disagree with you. So they popped it right away. So indeed, no battle is available for about 3.5 minutes now for 40k as they look to try to finish off the rest of the bridge. I feel like 40k has been stuck at this part of the bridge for 10 minutes now. It's just been a very slow grind for them. 3 deaths on the board, no battle reses. Berserker gets re-CC'd as they move over to the final 2 Berserkers. We see a blind come up, which immediately gets hit by Rentari, I guess, just to maintain aggro, make sure he doesn't hit anybody. And then they run in and it looks like Shadow Meld or Vanish, just to make sure that they drop all that aggro. Zanazal, though, for Method NA, looking great. Already down the second of this 3-boss kind of council-style fight, cleaning up the rest of the totems, and they're getting ready for Aka Ali, the final of the boss encounter.
Yeah, so one thing to note for the council fight is in between the boss spawns, you can actually use your Shadow Melt or your Vanish to actually get out of combat and reuse one of your potions, for example, which we've seen those teams doing. You can also use your Shadow Melt or your Vanish to get rid of any sort of debuff. If you still have a Severing Axe from Kula, for example, when Kula goes down, then you can just use your Shadow Melt or your Vanish and your debuff will drop immediately because you drop out of boss combat. So one tiny little trick that those teams have been doing in the past. Another trick that people have been doing is this barrel through, where they would just vanish or shadow melt at the very end of the cast to basically just have the ability to be casted again, because while the barrel through is being casted, Akali really doesn't do anything, just standing there casting.
Unfortunately, Kula axing Igloo a question just at the end of the encounter there and putting the Sever Axe. Does not have the Shadow Meld available, as Nagura just hinted to, because they used it to skip the trash and also dip sub 50%, so procced Undulating Tides on top of it. So a nasty little debuff right at the end. Unfortunately, just even more grievances here for Fourty as they're working on Xanazal halfway through the encounter now, 50% on the second boss. Method and Orly cleanly moving up. They have 91% trash on the board as JB runs over and is likely going to pull the Raptors here along with the Beastmaster and then combine it maybe with the Shadow of Zul.
Wow.
If they do, this is going to be a pretty nasty pull coming up right now, especially in a fortified setting.
Yeah, so this mini-boss is actually one of the most difficult mini-bosses to deal with, especially on Fortified, because we all know mini-bosses actually get buffed by Fortified and not by Tyrannical. So this Shadow of Zul, we've talked about this mini-boss before. Even in Tyrannical, it seemed like a very difficult mini-boss to deal with, but on Fortified, pulling Raptors and a Beastmaster on top of this seems very dangerous. That's why they actually saved their Bloodlust for this very moment. You can see them popping their Bloodlust here, and look at the HP of Nerf Tank, and look at JB just spam healing Nerf Tank to be able to keep him alive here. Still, Shield Wall is available, so he's probably going to use it very soon. There we go, he popped a Shield Wall, and now it's all going to be on JB to keep him alive here.
Yeah, I mean, this is scary. He's doing whatever he can with Spell Reflect. Of course, you cannot actually Spell Reflect the Shadow Bolts anyways, but at least you're providing that 15% damage reduction, magic damage reduction buffer. Nerf goes down, though, but they do have the Battle Res. Immediately it comes up from JB. Shakib, unfortunately, takes a hit, tries to run around and avoid some of the damage coming in. They're saving grace here, of course. The Raptors only very minimally aggro somebody and target somebody. Otherwise, they just kind of jump in place and cleave in front of them. So they manage once again to escape near disaster as Method and A finish up what they need to, head downstairs and try to skip and line of sight that Void Emissary that is very meanly placed at the bottom of that the stairwell there. King Dazar has now been pulled for Method and A, though.
Yeah, so Method and A just doing this whole bridge area is so much faster compared to Forty. Up until the bridge, they were neck and neck, they were really close to one another, but Forty just wasting so much time with this bridge pool and having the whole setup where we saw some of the CC not hitting properly. We actually see Rentari going down here as well while trying to do one of the skips, so they're just struggling a little bit with this bridge area, while Method and A seem to be much more efficient and much cleaner here, as they're on the last boss with this Beastmaster still alive. I believe this Beastmaster is not going to be enough for them to get enough percentage, so they probably have to kill anything else after this boss. But 40k only 96% as well, so we'll see what they do. I think the mini boss should be enough for them, so we'll see. But Method on the last boss, we talked about King Dazar before. King Dazar, not as difficult as long as you dodge the tornadoes and you dodge Reban, for example, jumping around doing this frontal cleave. Other than that, there's not that much damage going on except the jump from King Dazar, but that one can be avoided as well.
There are indeed lots of yumps on this fight. Tsala has come out now at 60% for phase 3 of 4 on this final boss here. Indeed, as you mentioned, Nagura, so the Shadow of Zul kind of mini boss does give 4%, so 40k is good to go as soon as they kill Shadow of Zul. Method and A is missing 4%. Question mark. I'm not really sure where they're going to get it from. I mean, the Void Emissary does not give 4% in a dungeon. That's the only thing within close proximity of them. I do think that, I'm not sure if they kill the Beast Hunter. I did see them kind of paralyze it on the side. Nonetheless, King Dazar now at 45% for Method and A. We'll see exactly where they round up their final percent of the dungeon for. I would expect them, of all teams, not to forget their percentage, so they probably have something up their sleeve right now. 40k just about to finish the Shadow of Zul, getting their 100% in a moment, unless we just have an issue. Okay.
Yeah, it's a mistake.
Okay. So
it's a graphic mistake.
It's a mistake. Both teams are actually at 100% indeed right now. Shadow of Zul, just an error with what you see on the stream. He does give the 4%. Both teams are technically done with trash. So everything looking good actually for Method and A. Scratch everything I just said for the past 30 seconds. Method and A looks like they're about to claim this match in a moment.
Yeah, so Method and A just it seems so clean. They do have 2 deaths on the board, but it didn't cost them a lot of time at all. We saw Nerf Tank go down in the first boss, but they recovered very, very well. And again, 100% trash for both of those teams. It's just Shadow of Zul that is not counting properly for the graphic on stream. So they do have all bosses killed and all trash. There we go. First game for Method and A.
Very good performance here by Method NA, having a quick run throughout King's Rest, taking that game 1 from 40k's hands. This is, again, pretty strong matchup between two teams. We saw it land. We've seen them constantly battling it out, duking it out throughout all of the cup play thus far. So what was really standing out to you, Tettles, especially with the rebalances and the fact that we're on Fortified, not Tyrannical?
It seems like just like a lot of the time, like you said, Fortified versus Tyrannical, that seems like that was just like a 2-minute difference in general. And then just how Method NA was actually pulling a lot of trash with the bosses here. You actually see for Golden Serpent, they pull these constructs with the Golden Serpent, which can actually be very scary, and you actually did see nerf go down. Whereas for the side of 40K, they did the more traditional pulling the constructs with the gauntlet trash. And then in addition to that, just Method NA just seemed like they did in fact deal with that bridge just in a way that was a little bit quicker than 40K. Also, Method NA did something very interesting in the Machimba room. With all these embalming fluids, Nerf, Lighty, and JB all ran away while the rogues ended up dealing with the bottom little bit of the embalming fluids getting their bursting out. And then something that was also interesting from Method NA and 40K is that they were trying to use the sarcophaguses from the Entomb on Machimba. Basically, if you click them right as somebody's getting entombed, then Machimba will no longer cast any abilities, which just allows you to pick up an immense amount of speed just on that boss. And then Method NA again on Kula the Butcher, that Berserker with the boss can actually be very dangerous, but again, it's just like showing how Method NA is trying to consolidate trash with bosses to make for the most efficient use of their time. And I think that's just shown the differences between like the Method NAs and the Method EUs and the Abracadabras that have like sat in the top 3 spots, and then the 40Ks and the Paint for Fems and all the other teams that have just been the 4, 5, and 6 place.
It starts showing the differences in their caliber, and it starts showing why, for example, they were able to win that MDI LAN this past summer. So very interesting onto that one. But before we go into Game 2, we will be taking a quick break, so don't go anywhere. Round 2 coming up on the Underrot right after this. Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon International. We're ready for round 2 of our lower quarters right now between 40K and Method NA, who's got the favor of Twitch chat at 84%. We'll see if 40K is going to be able to turn it around as we're ready and getting started in the Underrot.
That is a large amount of percent. We're going to check in with Tettles on that one because I'm pretty sure that's above 50%. But
that's a majority.
That
big
is a
percent.
majority. That is an official majority right there. So, but jokes aside, Method NA had an incredible performance in this dungeon versus Method EU. They still lost to Method EU, but by only mere seconds here. So I mean, we're going to expect. I'm going to have to stop Twitch chat on this one, Nigger. I think Method NA is probably going to take this if they manage to maintain the same performance they did last time.
Yeah, it looks like a huge pull coming in for 40K here as their Enchari drops really low with all the necrotic stacks, while also having the bleeds from those ticks as well. But they seem to have recovered here as the emissary is disappearing, and they only have to deal with the matron here and the rest of the middle pack. But Method NA completely shouting past this whole trash pack at the very start, going straight to this mask trash and also pulling the patrol while also popping that bloodlust.
Yeah, interesting. We've actually seen a few teams do this. I guess they've now deemed that in this season the mask is indeed the most dangerous kind of unit on this field before the first boss, so they want to coordinate their bloodlust and all of their cooldowns and dedicate it to killing that mask before just backpedaling a bit and backtracking a bit to make sure that they kill the remaining trash that they need before the dungeon. Shakib unfortunately proccing his cheat death there just the very end with that last headhunter as they finish it off and start heading down the path to the first boss. Rentari going down on the side of 40K. Keep in mind we've swapped affixes here for this dungeon. It's from an affix perspective probably the nastiest dungeon in the pool for this first cup of the Western of the Western side of things. I mean, we got Raging and Necrotic. That is just tank disaster waiting to happen.
That was actually a very cool skip by 40K here. And so the matrons actually do have true side, and there was a patrol on the bridge. So what they were doing was one of the ropes was grappling hooking to the bridge without getting aggroed by a matron, and then the rest of it was just wild charging in a human form to one of the ropes to be able to skip this pack here without getting aggroed. So very well done by 40K here. It does look very cool. But Method NA is already on 35% on Elderly Exa, and 40K slightly behind here.
I mean, I just blinked and basically Lax is already dead here for Method NA with the power of just huge amounts of damage, cooldown coordination, spell reflect, and of course this fortified environment. Bosses just have less health and are less dangerous as a result. It's interesting to see. I mean, the shift away, the Axe is a boss that we've always feared very much, just with one-shot potential on the tank, but it's over time, over the course of Season 2 and now into Season 3, just becomes kind of a joke. It's like no team ever struggles with it. You barely see any wipes on it. All the teams are usually dedicating their resources, offensive cooldowns, bloodlust, etc., to other things, whether it be trash or even saving it for Kragmaw's room. Method NA sneaking into Kragmaw's room here. Now, Season 2, we saw Method NA. This room was a bit of kryptonite for them, Nagura. They had a lot of struggles in here. Either the tank or JB would die. They seem to have cleaned it up yesterday, but do you think they kind of still have some of those nerves?
Yeah, I mean, they lost to Method EU, right? But it was super close. Like, Method A was just barely not making it, and it seemed like they had a very clean run as well. So I feel like they're confident in this strategy this time around. If they would have just been slightly faster, they would have beaten Method EU, right? So I feel like if it's this close to you beating Method EU, you don't want to change your strategy completely. You're just confident that you just, maybe change a very small thing here and there to be slightly faster. But I think mostly they're going to keep this strategy just because it was working so well. You see Fourty though having a complete different strategy. They were playing the early room very different, and now they're playing this room very different as well. As you can see, Rest really having a lot of aggro though, and getting all those necrotic stacks, being able to recover here though and dropping them off.
Yeah, Necrotic is quite dangerous in this room, and we are once again in a Tides-heavy dungeon. So more Emissary of the Tides present, meaning more mobs surrounded that cannot get interrupted or crowd-controlled. Very dangerous in this room. You got the Swarmers in there that are just doing the Screech and meleeing players. Finally, Bloodlust comes out here for Fourty with it, does this pretty substantial pull as they keep the Enchanted Emissary away, making sure that it doesn't cause any troubles. And of course, we do have a crowd-controlled Maggot on the side there as they try to chew through this. Resto taking so much damage, though, just constantly dipping sub 50, cannot manage to get up. He has double fixate from those Blood Swarmers, the most dangerous mob in here. They are now raging as well, dealing 100% increased damage after they hit that 30% mark. So a lot of danger coming in as he tries to soothe desperately on that 10-second cooldown and just calm things down here.
Yeah, so one thing to note as well, which is not very significant, but Fourty actually switching to the triple rogue opposed to the double rogue and Windwalker that they were playing in the King's Rest before. So they actually valuing the rogues a lot more in this dungeon, not only because of the damage, but also because of the insane amount of single target control that rogues provide. They do have the cheap shots, the gouges, the blind, the interrupts that just help so much in this dungeon because there's so many things that need to be controlled. Like you can see the death speakers here. You have the fixates going out, the megas that need to be interrupted. So Rogue's just providing so much utility for this dungeon here.
And of course, the tanks have now swapped to Dwarf, or at least Dark Iron Dwarf. You can see Fireblood available there for Rentari. So going to use that importantly to cleanse his necrotic stacks, which is now about, he's about to hit 30 on them. So just making sure he stays in the last second. They haven't, of course, been cleaned as he continues to move away from those mobs and just make sure he's not taking too much damage, not committing too many resources before heading over to Kragmaw. Method and A, huge trouble coming in right now as the Maggot gets a frontal enraged breath on the group, immediately wiping them. I mean, that's 100% increased damage on something that's already quite lethal in this fortified environment. So, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we were talking about Method and A having struggles traditionally in Season 2 in this room, and they followed suit again here, Nagura.
Yeah, that's a huge mistake. I mean, they're going to lose so much time. If I'm being completely honest, I think Fourty was already ahead even before Method and A wiped here, because Fourty is already on 50%. They were doing this room much faster than Method and A did. And as you mentioned, they're just struggling specifically in this Kragmaw room. I'm not sure if it's their strategy just themselves overdoing, thinking they can do those huge pulls and then not working out, or if it's just like specifically this room causing problems for them. Also, one thing I want to note is the Maggot cast going through, definitely, they have this Windwalker instead of having the triple rogue. And I talked about the single target utility that the rogues provide. Maybe that was actually a problem, just, Monk not providing as many interrupts, single target stuns, and so on, compared to rogues, and maybe that's what happened. Maybe they just ran out of interrupts to be able to interrupt this Maggot.
Maybe. I mean, we could take a look, of course, after the VOD. Hopefully, Tettles had a good eye on that. But, it's hard to say. Maybe he had Ring of Peace available. Maybe he had Paralyze available. Maybe there was just bad communication, and somebody that was expected to get that Maggot bump there did not. And, that's all she wrote. Method and A now 6 deaths on the board, still slowly trying to move over and recover as JB casts Revitalize yet again to get Nerf up off the ground. They continue with the second room. 40k here looking great, looking primed to win this match. For now, we're only about halfway through here, but Kragmaw sitting at a good 60% for them as he gets ready for his next Dangerous Tantrum, of course, where the players will need to stomp out these glowing larvae on the ground so they didn't transform into ticks.
Yeah, one more thing to know with this Maggot Breath, of course, is they're not bad players because they obviously assign someone to interrupt this cast. So you don't move out of the cast because this is a dodgeable ability in theory, right? The Maggot cast you will target a player and then will do a frontal clone. So in theory, you can walk out of it, but if you expect one of your team members to interrupt it, you're not gonna move because in this environment, if you have a team and you're participating in the MDI, then obviously you trust your team member to do their job. And therefore, one of them just didn't do their job or didn't have their ability ready, and that's why they all died here. It was a one-shot too because they were raging at the same time, right? Fourty though, not having any issues like that. They only have this one death from Rentari at the very start of the dungeon to those ticks, right? And they're about to finish off Kragma here.
Yeah, I mean, after that, if I'm someone on Method and I would never be able to trust and love again. They've let me down for the final time. But Kragma here, 3% in just a moment as Fourty tries to finish up the rest of the encounter, committing to not stomping any of the remaining ticks out and just getting ready to move on through the dungeon. Likely a Shroud coming up here, as we've seen in the previous series of Underrod yesterday. Don't want to deal with this Enchanted Emissary right on top of the Danger Noodle, so moving right on through here as they prepare to pull the Guardians. Not sure if they're going to combine anything with the Guardians, and there is an Emissary of Tides in there, meaning that that Death Speaker in there is going to have free range to cast, as is the Bloodswarmer that they've just pulled down. So they have to get rid of that Emissary very quickly.
Oh, they actually had to raise that cast go through. So we see one of the reanimated Guardians spawning here. And you see Wolf Disco dropping very low because of this the Fixate from the Bloodswarmer that they pulled. Now this is very interesting because usually we don't see those Bloodswarmers pulled just because Bloodswarmers are the mobs you want to avoid at all costs because they do so much damage. But with all the control that they're having with those rogues, with the single target stuns, you have the Vortex as well that can help out with the Fixate. They just seem confident to get this extra percentage here. And it's basically free percentage because you're just pulling it on top of the Guardian. So definitely very well done by them, as they also pull the Defiler here as well.
The Defiler indeed does join the pack right now. Rentari deems that it's okay to return to the group. He did use his Fireblood earlier. I think there's just a bit of an issue on the cooldown, but we did see the Necrotic on the cooldown display for that ability, but we did see the Necrotic stacks drop off of Rentari there as he continued to tank and then safely backed off during the Raging just to make sure they don't deal with that. Now, most teams here are moving on to the third boss that we've seen so far in the season at least, to actually kind of move along the side of it and then combine it with the boss later, or as we're seeing right now, just combine it directly into the boss. But what they do is a two-step process of separating the emissaries and the defilers. Of course, the last thing you want is an emissary on top of two defilers that is preventing spell interrupts.
Yeah, one thing to note as well with Rentari being a dwarf, that means of course that Rentari does not have the Shadow Melt available. Now in most other dungeons we see teams lose a lot of time if they don't have the Shadow Melt on all the players, but in this Underrod we don't usually see huge skips happening at all. Only at the very start of the dungeon sometimes and before they go to Kragma's room, but Fourty dealing with this very well, that they don't have this Shadow Melt available to them. So really good job by using this dwarf here to just have an easier time dealing with the Necrotic, and it worked out for them so far. You see Rentari unfortunately refreshing to 23 stacks before he managed to leap away. We might see a taunt come out here by Igloo to be able to reset the stacks. There we go. He actually managed to get it off.
Yeah, so the only safe time during this boss when you can really reset your stacks as a tank is during that Festering Harvest cast where you want to move opposite side of the room, but it's sometimes just barely not enough time. But fortunately they do manage to clean the stacks there. As Nagura mentioned, we saw earlier Lofus committing his Cloak of Shadows as well to mass soak the mushrooms before they went off during those Festering Harvest cast. Of course, there's no Monk or Priest or Paladin available in this group right now, so they have no way to dispel the disease from the mushrooms. So the only way to kind of emergency soak them is to pre-immune and run through them. Or I guess somebody could just soak them and just mass heal through it. But they do pack quite a punch here as Zancha hits 25%. Method and A still trying to claw back into action. Scorecaller Zancha for them just hitting 70% and 73% trash on the board.
Yeah, Method and A actually managed to catch up quite a bit now. Now they're still behind in trash percentage, 7% behind and 50% in boss HP. Of course, on top of also having a 25 seconds difference, so there's still quite a lot for Method and A to go, but they did recover pretty well from this full team wipe. Sometimes you see a team having a full team wipe and then they just fall even further behind because they struggle to maintain their, their motivation and to keep going. But Method and A, of course, being this veteran team, keeping a cool head and just continuing, trying to still win.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you see teams, just RP walking or something, or dancing in animal form if they've wiped miserably in the dungeon, but not on the side of Method and A here. Sporecaller Zancha about to hit 20%. Fourty now doing a pretty substantial pull, but the same pull that we've seen other teams do. Emissary once again present in the pack. I think it's just part of the strat of the teams, Nagura, where they just kind of commit to the fact that Array's dead is probably going to get off. They just don't have the DPS to kill the Emissary fast enough. They don't want to be inefficient and separate the two parties. so they're just going to cleave a Guardian down. I mean, it's really not a big deal if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's just an extra Guardian when there's already 4 or 5 of them present anyway, so you just cleave it down, Forehead. Now, we do pull the Defiler on top of the rest of the pack right now. The Corruptor hasn't raged. They want to make sure they get away from those Abyssal Strike Tentacles. Those are an easy one-shot in Fortified Raging environment.
Yeah. Method and A also catching up quite a bit in percentage here while they were fighting Sanja. So I think they actually pulled quite a bit of trash on top of the boss. So very well done by Method and A to catch up on the trash percentage here. But they're doing the pull now that 40k is already done with. 40k only has to deal with those 2 Corruptors and the Emissary of Tides here. Then the doors will open and they will be able to get to the last boss. One thing as well, 40k does have Bloodlust available to them for the last boss, while Method and A does not. They used it on Sancha to get rid of the trash on top of the boss. So 40k is still needing to have a full team vibe really at this point for Method and A to catch up.
I don't think they need to do that. Hopefully they don't do that. Corruptor's now enraging here for 40k as they're looking to wrap this up and head downstairs. Method and A still trying to hold their own, doing the same pull we just saw earlier, where we were just commenting on the race that cast going through, etc. with all the Guardians. They're trying to clean that up right now as they hit 90% trash. They'll probably be at about the same 94 that 40k has finished off to get their 100% and head downstairs through the door, quote unquote, more of like a spiderweb wall thing. But nonetheless, the Sparks of Love have now disintegrated the web going down, and unlike the previous season, we have no Reaping Wave to wait for down here. So as soon as they hit the ground, they're going to grab the boss and just start their nice circular rotation and chew through that health 3 times over.
Yeah, so the only thing that can go really wrong here, in my opinion, for 40k is if Igloo goes down. If Igloo goes down, somehow they, of course, cannot get him back up because no one has a Battle Rush except himself on this Druid. So if he somehow goes down by getting his best spore or the front or anything like that, any sort of burst combination, then they will have trouble finishing off the boss without him. But we've seen some teams even finishing this boss without a healer in the past, so we'll see what happens here. But right now they seem to be doing really well, and of course we don't see the boss dropping because it's the energy bar that is depleting instead of the HP, and then we see those Blood Visages spawn, and once those die, the HP will get removed.
1/6 HP each of those 6 mobs right there to finish off the boss. And but I mean, if Igloo is about to die, he can just precast Battle Res on himself, right, Nagira, and not have any struggles as a result. But it looks like they should be easily able to clean this up. Right now. Thanks, Jack. That was very nice of you. They should be easily able to clean this up right now. I mean, once again, fortified environment. There's no reaping on top of it. Just a sporadic, unlucky spore spawning on the players would be the only disastrous thing to get Elseratted, so to speak, on this, since he seems to be very unlucky with those spores. Seems to always happen to him. But Unbound Abomination now about to get the 4th ad down. There we go. And Method and A only starting now. Method and A has been so clean so far between yesterday and today, but this is their first real hiccup. And to be fair, even before this yesterday, they were just spotless.
Yeah.
But even in King's Rest, they had a couple of moments that were looking a bit dire.
Yeah, to be honest, in this King's Rush, when Nerf went down on his very first boss, it could have been a disaster. So definitely some hiccups here. And in this time in Underout, they didn't manage to recover. While 40k having a really clean run and evening it out 1-1 for 40k.
40k bringing it back into balance as they take that underrun and force the game 3. Very cool to start seeing, especially because we've seen a lot of underrot thus far throughout the tournament here. Tettles, very nasty affixes for these teams, but how they're handling that room for Kragmaw has just been absolutely critical, and a lot of times just deciding who is going to be able to get that little bit of advantage.
Yeah, beguiling an Emissary of the Tides, and just like how teams are actually using their Bloodlust seems like it's definitely been one of the more interesting aspects for how teams are actually navigating this underrot. But like you said, the affixes here, not only just the beguiling, but all the other affixes are also very dangerous. Method in A got off to a pretty strong start. Their choice of bloodlusting their opening pull was very interesting, and it allowed them to kill Elderly Axa pretty significantly ahead of 40k. Whereas 40k here, doing this very large pull inside of Kragmaw's room, their whole entire team dropped so low because of all of these Feral Bloodswarmers and all the other damage that's just going out here, but they were actually able to recover, and this is actually a very efficient pull in terms of like the pull size. You actually had to deal with the Enchanted Emissary, And then that pull with their Bloodlust compounding with some of the issues that we saw from the side of Method NA just kind of put Fourty in the driver's seat. Fourty's strategy overall for this dungeon, though, was also very, very strong. And it's the second time that we've actually seen Method NA lose to a team inside of this Underrot with this Bloodlust strategy for Kragmaw's room. So maybe there should be like a differentiation of where you end up actually using your Bloodlust here. But overall, this is just a very good showing by Fourty, and they are showing why they are battling for this like third, second, potentially first place against like the champions of Method NA.
Yeah, and both of these teams have had a lot of experience having deep runs in that lower bracket, so that's what makes it such a great matchup to start seeing who's going to win out this week and then carry it forward to the next 2 weekends for the West. But we've been playing around with Method Dungeon tools for our broadcast a little bit. What do you got for us on this one, Tettles?
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting to see. So we're going to be looking at the pull that actually ended up wiping Method NA here. So basically they have these 3 reanimated Guardians off to the side. They of course have this Maggot here, this Disease Lasher, this Living Rot, this Bloodswarmer because they've already killed one of them, and then they have this other Living Rot here. So overall, this is a pretty safe pull, and basically once they end up killing this Feral Bloodswarmer, they go and pull this one. Nerf ends up jumping basically across the room, and then this Maggot over here ends up casting its Bile on the whole entire group and ends up wiping them. So after having seen this in Method Dungeon tools, we can actually watch the clip and watch it back in action for how it ended up happening here. So you actually see Nerf, like I said, he ends up kiting back and forth. He ends up using his AoE stun to try to make sure that the mobs weren't on him, and then he leaps across the room. You actually see raging coming out on a lot of those mobs. He goes and picks up that Feral Bloodswarmer, and then you see this Maggot coming from off screen. It ends up crossing the room, and then eventually it's just going to turn, cast its Bile, and it's going to end up just having a full wipe on the group. And basically once you do have this full wipe, it's pretty much unrecoverable.
Definitely was, and it took so much time because they also, if I'm not mistaken, lost Lighty as they were getting everybody running back, and then they had to wait for Nerf to be able to res again. So they're casting 2 different mass reses, getting everybody back in, and it just eats up a massive amount of time. So that's going to put us into a game 3. So don't go anywhere, guys. The deciding match between Fourty and Method NA right after this. Method NA and Fourty are tied right now, putting us into game 3 in the lower quarters. This game is going to decide who goes home and who moves on to face the winner of Paint for Femme or No Girls Allowed, as we're going off into Shrine of the Storm.
Shrine of the Storm, one of the most dangerous dungeons in terms of front-loaded difficulty with casters. We're back in that teaming, quaking environment, so teaming makes it even nastier. Both teams right away grabbing everything they can in the first room and jumping right over, at least soon enough we'll be jumping over, I assume, to that Brazier. There goes Nerf's tank immediately snapping everything as somebody makes sure to bump the Enchanted Emissary out of the way. Interested to see Fourty actually doesn't do that. They just round everything up alone.
Yeah, interesting. I think we haven't really seen this before, that they don't use the snapping strategy. But of course, snapping is not as simple as it seems, because we've seen Method U, for example, struggle a lot with this snapping strategy, where they would snap everything on the Lantern, but then some of the mobs ending up resetting, and then they will hit the melees because the tank is out of range while they are kiting, so they can't regain the aggro, and then they just have some random daps going down because of the snapping strat. So maybe Fourty had some struggles with it in practice, and they just chose not to do so. They were finishing off this strat a lot slower compared to Method NA, though. Method NA already on the first boss with the 10% trash, while Fourty is still dealing with this trash early on.
And of course, what's even more interesting is if you want to see, but actually let's put what is interesting on hold here. Lighty unfortunately does not get the skip properly in, so not only is he dead on the floor, they'll need to use the res 5-second penalty on that, but he will not have that cheat death available for 6 minutes. But I was going to say, you already see some strategies differing between the 2 teams here, and if you want to take a closer look individually at the team, we have now squad streaming available, so make sure you enable that squad streaming when it prompts you on the main Warcraft stream. You can actually take a nice full screen view at the individual teams should you be interested in following one of the teams and seeing exactly what they're doing in a nice zoomed in fashion. But Method NA wasting no time and grabbing Heldis, as we've seen other teams do, right on top of Akusir, the best design boss here, and getting a lot of the benefit from that haste rune that he puts down. But of course, this puts a huge strain on the healers with that pulsing dust.
best stand boss, indeed. We see Method and A not actually using that Bloodlust here, which is very interesting because this seems like a very difficult pull. Not only do you have to deal with this boss, which is a very annoying boss, by the way, but it's also tyrannical. And then you have the mini boss and the apprentices. So interesting to see that they're not using their Bloodlust. I wonder what they're saving it for. One thing to note as well is, of course, we do have different affixes, teaming and quaking. And about Shrine, they did change how the percentage gain from trash works in this dungeon. And with teaming, you have the trash be worth even less percentages because there's more trash in the whole dungeon available to you. So teams definitely said that they were struggling to get in percentage to get the 100% in Shrine of the Storm, and therefore they do need to pull some of those mini bosses like Heldis, as we can see from Method and A, which is something they didn't do in the past in the spring season, where they would just skip all the mini bosses.
Indeed, yeah. So the mini bosses are something we're going to expect to see. Definitely, Heldis, as we saw earlier for Method and A, is something that all the teams seem to be pulling now. Sorn as well, once we get to the Rune Carver area after the first boss. We've seen a kind of 50-50 split on the Guardian Elemental on the bridge. Some teams opted to just combine him and burn him down. Some skipped him, some tried to skip him and didn't do it successfully. So they had to burn him down. We'll see what these teams do as Fourty now gets started on Akusir as well. 90% on the board for them. Method and A already dealing with the transition that hits at 50%, cleaving down these Aqualings before he will reunite into his full form again at around 15% HP, and then they'll be able to move on. Did we see Heldis get pulled by Fourty as well?
I don't think so.
No, so Heldis is still on the side there for Fourty. They've only pulled some of the apprentices on the side, so a bit below. I was actually going to say a bit slower on trash percent, but they're actually ahead. They just didn't pull everything yet that Method and A has, so no wonder they got to the boss a bit later here.
Yeah, so they were doing more trash before this first boss compared to Method and A. Method and A only did this very first pull with the snapping, so they got 10% before running to the boss immediately, and then the rest of the percent, the 8% that they have right now, is the trash they pulled on top. Well, Fourty did 2 trash pulls before Aquasir, so that's why Fourty actually ends up having more trash percentage, and therefore they're a little bit further behind when it comes to boss damage. One thing though, that Fourty actually did use their Bloodlust once they pulled Aquasir on top of having some trash as well, while Method and A is still holding on to theirs. I assume they're gonna save it for some trash pull later, maybe that pull in that hallway that we've seen Methodion and Abracadabra do.
Or maybe next dungeon. We'll have to see exactly where they decide to use it. Method now 22, 23, 25% trash on the board, and are now moving on. They've already killed Heldis, so they're now moving on to Sorn's room in the bottom. We've seen some very aggressive pulls come out of groups here as they're going to run right past this Void Enchanted Emissary, ignore it completely by line of sighting and ranging the cast in the first place, and then likely shadow meld it off after they've dealt with all the trash in this room. This is a huge pull coming in here, and there's the Bloodlust finally from Method and A as they just get everything rounded up together. Immediate shockwave comes out of Nerf Tank there just to make sure to stabilize everything. A lot of casters in there while the players huddle in to the rune on the ground dropped by Rune Carver Sorn to make sure that they mitigate 70% of that incoming damage.
Yeah, and it's actually 70% of all damage incoming, so if you get the quaking, you do not need to go out of it, even though you see them spread out anyway, but you don't have to. You can just stack on top of each other with the quaking because it's 70% reduction for everything, so they can definitely just stand in there for all of the damage incoming. Now we see Fourty, they're about to down Aquasir. You can see them already moving a little bit ahead. Unfortunately, they get one more surging rush here at the very end, but they're about to do the same pull, I believe, but they don't have their Bloodlust available, so maybe they're choosing to do a little bit of a smaller pull, and they also have Heldis still available.
Yeah, just creepily off to the side there. I saw Heldis talking too, but it looks like they're just going to stealth past. Now, Void Emissaries in the hallway here, they do have True Sight, so you're not going to be able to use that Shroud all the way through the hallway. They just use it for Heldis himself as they run downstairs. Rentari grabs everything in the room. Same pull. Actually, I don't think they pulled the corner pack.
Oh, yeah.
There is a four-unit corner pack there consisting of a few apprentices, including 2 Iron Hulls. So they did a slightly smaller pull, which makes sense. They didn't have access to that Bloodlust, and they pulled more at the beginning of the dungeon. Nerf Tank in just a bit of trouble here right now, dipping sub 20%, but JB managing to stabilize the situation as they've pulled the trash before the Guardian Elemental bridge into the room as well to make use of that rune on the floor as needed.
Yeah, very smart play by Method and A to just keep the rune from the mini boss from Zorn here alive to get the 70% reduction while also dealing with the next trash pack. 40k, again, just doing a little bit of a smaller pull, so maybe that's why they had 2 pulls before Aquas here, because they didn't want to have this bigger trash pull that Method and A did. Maybe they just didn't think it was safe to do, and now they're actually pulling it on top, so they did aggro it now. Loaf is actually proccing the cheat Dap here on this pull, but yeah, 40k just a little bit slower on this trash here. While Method and A already passed the bridge, they are using their Shadow Meld to get rid of the aggro from the bridge mini boss, and yeah, Method and A just pulling ahead here.
Yeah, pulling slightly ahead. And now, of course, you saw earlier they left one of the Spiritualists out of the group and just cleaved it down what looked like inefficiently by itself after that big pull, but they had to do so because there was an Emissary of Tides present in that group that would have prevented interrupting the rapid mending, and therefore some of the mobs would have been healed, and that's the last thing you need. Runecarver Storm finally going down here for 40k, as we'll see exactly how, if they deal with the Guardian Elemental on the bridge. They still have their own pull to deal with here of the Tides pack that I just mentioned. We can see the roots come up on it right away as they pull the remaining mobs back into the room. Mending Rapids should be able to be interrupted now. It's well out of range there, as Method and A did a pretty substantial pull before the second boss here. I do expect that they're going to combine a lot of these smallies, as we call them, or initiates, with the second boss here. We are in a tyrannical environment, and this next boss, we've actually seen teams struggle already this season with this boss, Nagura.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen
Lizelle 1% off.
We've seen them drop really low, but 40k is still 0 death, so they seem to have recovered as Igloo is popping that Tranquility to keep everyone alive here. But Method and A, you know, they're already on their way to the second boss. It's just very difficult fight, and again, it's a tyrannical setting, so this boss is getting just this much more difficult. They're pulling some of the initiates on top, which is not a huge problem because we don't have anything like bursting or necrotic, so those mobs are not going to be a huge deal to just passively cleave down. But yeah, we've talked about Galecaller Fae and the cast, the Slicing Blast that needs to be interrupted. We see actually Lestelle going down on the skip for 40k, but I think they managed, so all they have to do is get the mass rest going and should be fine.
But once again, we see Igloo is procced his Ashara staff. That's a 10-minute cooldown. Not going to have that available for later in the dungeon with higher charges. Something that JB, well, let's have a look here. Is JB using the staff? He should be. He is indeed. Okay, so he has not procced the staff, safe to keep those charges for later in the dungeon, where they'll become more beneficial with a bigger hit. Resto is now out of it for 10 minutes, essentially. 40k doing the same pull that we saw earlier come from Method and A before the ramp leading up to the second boss. Galecaller Fae now down to 57% health for Method and A as they opt to do a more efficient cleave strategy, but of course dangerous mechanically by leaving both bosses alive longer.
Yeah, and one thing I've noted before is Galecaller Fae, once she has 100% energy or 100 energy, she will buff herself. And if she has the buff up and you interrupt one of the Slicing Blasts, she will spawn those tornadoes, as you can see around this room. Now, when we were playing this in the spring season with the fortified affix, then people would just not interrupt the Slicing Blast and heal through it once the buff was up, just to not have those tornadoes spawn, because it was more efficient for the DPS to not having to dodge those tornadoes. But on a tyrannical setting, I assume it's just going to be too much damage to not interrupt them, and therefore you do have those tornadoes going around in the room, which makes this fight a lot more difficult.
Makes it a lot more difficult indeed. I'm going to be curious to see, Nagura, what happens after this boss, because that's where kind of a few things have changed. We see teams pretty aggressively pulling even the Ritualists coming up, and certainly a lot of the Enforcers to make up for the percent, not only for teaming, but just because they've rebalanced a lot of the percentage in the dungeon. We do know the Eels at the end in Volzith's room have now decreased count, so you need well over 80% before getting to the last room. Lofus going down here, unfortunately eating the frontal from Brother Ironhall. I guess he missed his breakfast, but does manage to get battle res immediately. Not going to be available again for 9 minutes or so, so they're really playing in hardcore mode at the moment.
Yeah, and they're out of battle rests now, and this boss, we talked about it, it's difficult with having all those tornadoes around on a tyrannical setting, so if they lose one more player, they're either going to have to reset the boss or just finish the boss with 4 members. So we'll see how 40k is going to deal with this. Well, Method and A doing a really good job. They only have 1 death so far, still have 2 battle rests available, and they're about to down this boss. 60% trash already, so just 3% behind compared to 40k, and they're on their way to those difficult Enforcer pulls.
I think that might be the first time we've ever seen Ironhold die before Faye there.
Yeah.
They're actually, like, Method and A balanced it so perfectly to get maximum cleave efficiency, especially with the blade flares coming out from these 3 outlaw rogues. Of course, maximum danger, as you then have both bosses doing their mechanics for the duration of the fight, but worked out for them. Igloo has procced his Undulating Tides, won't be available again for 45 seconds now, so that shield safety net, not to mention single target damage, is gone from Igloo. So a bit of a hit there for 40k as they still deal with the rest of the boss. They're doing the exact same thing as well, as both bosses approach 50% on the right side. Nerf Tank goes down though, and Lighty immediately procs Cheat Death on this very dangerous pull that Nagur just mentioned. We're getting Ritualist Cast go off. You can see the Shadow Bolt volley debuff. Lighty goes down. Shakib's at 2 stacks and just runs away desperately as JB has deemed this pull is now over. Runs away. Great heads up play by then to immediately just run away and drop combat so that they can salvage the pull. Oof.
Yeah, this was a huge pull. I think they were gathering 4 or 5 Enforcers on top of having some Ritualists. So this insane pull, we talked about this before, Enforcers just doing so much damage. Even if it's not fortified, it just does so much damage. Nerf Tank dying through that shield wall, I believe he had even shield wall and I think Iron Bark as well. So a lot of defensive cooldowns, but still just dying through it. So JB said, you know, they did have battle rests available, but they just chose to get away and Shadow Melt instead of trying to rest, because once your tank dies on this Enforcer pull, you're just going to be done for it. You're not going to be able to get the aggro back, and you also don't have any defensives anymore. So we'll see if they manage to do this pull. They have to go a little bit smaller now, just because they don't have those defensives anymore.
That's true. It allows 40k to catch up just a bit. Gale Caller Faye about to fall here, so they've separated the percentage just a bit. His brother Ironhall is still at around 23% right now. Avatar just about to fade here for Mentari. He got his nice burst damage in, and they're doing what they can to finish that and capitalize on the idea, but they missed a Ritualist cast again here. A danger here for Method and A as another pulse goes off. Nerf Tank playing as defensive as he can and getting away. Tranquility already channeling here for JB to try and stabilize the group. That was a close call again, and Nerf Tank wants nothing to do with it. Just wants to get right out of there and let those Enforcers get kited so that he doesn't risk dying again.
Yeah, this is the chance for 40k, right? They are 63%, so they're not far behind in trash at all. They also have their Bloodlust available here, so we'll see how they do this pull. Maybe they do a smaller pull, because Rentari does have all the defensives ready, so they can do this Enforcer pull as well, but we've seen Method and A struggle, so maybe 40k is trying to go a little bit smaller.
No.
No, they're not. They're just pulling all their forces too.
I know they still have the 2 up on the stairs,
Sure.
but this is either 4 Enforcers or 5 Enforcers, something in there. So the deep smashes are really the danger that we keep gawking about here on the desk right now. We haven't seen Shield Wall pop just yet for Antari. He's still kind of trying to milk the remainder of his last stand right now. Finally, Shield Wall gets popped. 8 seconds of 40% diminishing, not diminishing return, damage reduction for Rentari. He starts to back up, and this group was much better done than Method and A here, as they managed to use the Ursul's Vortex at the very end to get rid of the Enforcers, help Rentari out, and everybody was maintaining proper kicks and interrupts on that Ritualist. So great for them there. They spread out for the Quaking and are ready to head up the stairs. Rentari goes ahead, grabs aggro, and they're likely just going to drop aggro on the bridge where Method and A is currently fighting.
Okay, so this is going to be really close now. 40k is slightly slower on this area here. Method and A having 1 more death. So 5 seconds difference between those 2. And now it's all going to be about the rest of the dungeon. Whoever does the bridge part faster. But we've seen the bridge part in the King's Rest, and Method and A was a lot faster there. So we'll see how this bridge works out for 40k.
Yeah, let's see if they have to bridge the gap here between the difficulties they were having and this dungeon. Method and A now 80% as they grab another pull here. Now, something about the emissaries is they're often, even though it looks like they're linked to packs, they're not actually. You can separate packs by pulling them very carefully, even if they're just patrolling slightly away from the emissary, which is, we see the result here for Method and A right now. That enchanted emissary is not really tied to anything, so it's just sitting there in the middle of the room. They're likely going to just mass stealth by it after they deal with the rest of this pack that they're chewing through right now. 40k still killing off the tentacles here, as we see the cultists just waiting for them to be pulled ahead. One of the Rip Mine casts did go through on Rentari. You can see that huge hit that it gave, and of course the decreased health by 10% per stack finally faded off of him as Method and A mass stealths and heads on into Lord Stormsong's room.
Yeah, so Method and A on 84%. They still miss a little bit more percentage to be able to get into the last room. I believe it was 88% or something like that. They definitely need a little bit more to be able to go to the last area, because you don't only have the eels left and this middle pack, and the percentage of the eels got nerfed, so you don't get as much anymore as you did in the spring season, and therefore they need to heal a little bit more before they get there. 40k on their heals though, they're also on their way to get to those dwellers, and they're all on 84% as well, so this is definitely close between those two teams.
The moment JB's been waiting for, finally procs his staff and deletes all of the lashers. Look at the damage on the board, 391k DPS, 5 million damage done for JB. That's the power of the Ashara staff, and that's why you want to wait as long as possible to get as many charges as possible before you incur the 10-minute CD before it's active again. So JB, well planned there, did the work, deleted the side that currently 40k is now working on in order to get access to Lord Stormsong, who of course is doing the RP in the background. 85% here for Method and A on Lord Stormsong. 5-second difference, sure, Nagura, but I mean, Method and A is like probably 20-30 seconds ahead at this point.
Yeah, definitely. You also see the percentage difference a little. Okay, so no, they have 89% on 40k as well, so definitely pulling the boss a little bit slower. This one death difference is really not going to make or break it at this point. Now, one thing to note about this staff play, this was definitely planned, as you mentioned, by JB, because there's also a Tides Emissary in this right Dweller pack, meaning that it can't actually interrupt or AoE stun to interrupt the Lash cast, which does do a lot of damage if you don't have any sort of interrupts for it or any sort of defensives, which is you can't stun them if you have the Tides Emissary. So very well done by Method and A to save this staff proc. Now for 40k, Igloo did not have the staff available. You can see the debuff in the party frame here, so they couldn't do the same thing. So they had to have a little bit of downtime before they ran into the Dwellers, just because they needed to wait for some defensives to get up into some cooldowns to be able to kill them so they don't die while doing so. But yeah, Method and A 20% ahead on the boss here.
That's a lot of percent in a tyrannical environment right now. Huge pulsing Quake hitting there. Lizelle actually getting chunked down with the Rip Mind cast as well. Unfortunately, was one of the closest members to Lord Stormsong, but managed to just cleanse it off and not get that cheat death proc. Finally, the final Cloak of Shadows of the 6 rogues within this mirror match coming out from Lofus right now to try and prevent the mind control going out. So none of the rogues have a cloak to try and pre-immune that mind control cast anymore. Method and A now 17% on the board, and it looks like they're going for a strategy where they don't actually deal with any of these. Okay, I was going to say they don't deal with any of the orbs, but they let one player eat all of them up. But before this, anybody who was mind control, such as Yoda before, would just jump in the water and get rid of the mind control that way and just pool up as many orbs as possible. Shakib ate all of them except one there, so he's a hungry boy right now as Lord Stormsong falls here for Method and A, and they drag him over to the water, getting ready to move over to Volzith's room.
Yeah, so we talked about the last boss, and on a tyrannical setting in the spring season, we would see teams save their bloodlust for the last boss just so they're able to one-phase the boss, to only get one intermission phase. Now we didn't see a team be able to one-phase the boss in this tyrannical setting in the summer season yet. But we saw one team actually get the boss really low to 4%. I believe it was Abra that got the boss so low. So if one of those teams actually manages to one-phase, only get one intermission, that's going to be a huge advantage, because the intermission phase takes you a long time. No matter how good or how fast you are, to get one last intermission phase is just going to be a huge difference. So if one of those teams actually manages to do so, that would definitely seal the deal, and that team would win at this point, since they're so close to one another.
They are indeed. Method and A now sneaking into Volzith's room. 40k following suit. Was it just me, or was like Method and A a bit slow to get everything started here? It was kind of weird. I mean, they were out of this tunnel well ahead, but I guess they were just making sure to get all the eels, which we've now seen pulled over 2 packs on top of Volzith here and cleave down for maximum, oh my god, nerf rogues damage coming up as we see Yoda rocket up to almost over 500k DPS. Eels get deleted immediately, and Volzith will soon be starting his first transition. We've not seen a single team so far of the 4 teams that have attempted to one-phase this boss after transition be successful at doing it. The lowest we've seen is 4%. Yesterday, the Method teams got 9%, I believe, or one of the Method teams got 9%, so I just don't know if it's doable.
Yeah, maybe
even though they have so much gear, we'll have to see if they can commit to it. You know, you have to have all of the stars aligned here. You probably need a staff. You need everybody to have their undulating tides not procced if they're running that Azurite trade. So we'll see if it works out here for Method and A, but 40k is doing the same pull right now as they spread out for Quaking and have pulled the boss. They got to get a move on, though. I mean, they got that 5-second buffer because of Method and A's 3 deaths, but that's just not enough right now.
Yeah, definitely not. They need to do something to catch up here. This one phase I've been talking about, it might not be possible, right? The closest percentage we've seen is 4%, and it's still quite a bit on a tyrannical setting. So maybe not positive at all with the damage they have available to them. But we'll see what happens. Now Method and A out of the intermission phase here. We'll see if they go straight to the boss. They don't deal with any trash in between. Immediately go and interrupt the boss, pop their Bloodlust to be able to nuke this. They're also pulling the trash on top. So that means they definitely know they're not going to be able to one-phase this, right? Because else they wouldn't be pulling the trash. But this is still a huge pull, especially if you can see this AoE coming out. Now, okay, they did manage to get the interrupts off. Okay. There we go. This is interesting because why would you do that? Like the boss pulling the boss on top means those denizens are just standing inside. Now you see the rogues Shakib just having to run in there to get the interrupt off, and now they finally move. So now they're finally out of the zone.
I mean, they're just trying to do it for max efficiency here, right? To cleave the boss with the ads as opposed to separating it, but it's just so dangerous. They're not even close to getting the boss quite low for that transition phase. They have ads running everywhere right now. I believe the trash is still alive. The trash is actually reset. This is not looking good for Method and A here. High hit risk, high reward, but it just did not pay off. So all of the trash damage they did is gone. They lost a ton of damage on the boss trying to interrupt the trash, DPS the trash down. Didn't work out for them. And now they have to make sure they survive probably a third transition phase. They even committed their Bloodlust to this, and it still didn't work out for them. Something that Fourty has now done on their side, committing their Bloodlust.
I believe it was just a mistake to have to pool spawn there. I mean, it's okay to pull the trash, but if you pull the boss on top of the trash and then have to spool the pool spawn there, even with the increased range of outlaw rogues, they were not able to reach them. So that was definitely a mistake by the boss positioning, having this pool there. So this might actually cause Method and A to lose because they have this whole trash reset, which they need to get the 100% trash percentage. Well, Fourty used their Bloodlust as well. They're probably not going to be able to one-phase it, so they are going to get another transition as well. But if they manage to beat faster with the trash, then Fourty are the ones that are going to win.
Very windy day here today in the studio, of course, as we move over out of Volzit's area and start to clear down. 23% for Method and A, who's done their second transition. If they get a third transition here, it's going to be oopsie daisies. So hopefully they manage to get past that. But no, that's not the cast. Okay, so it's going to be close. Actually, it's going to be really close. They don't have Bloodlust for it or anything. I don't know what kind of cooldowns have lined up for it. They have adrenaline rushes on the rogues, but those have already been used. So hopefully they manage to get it off. As Volzith is now 12% for Fourty. So once again, another team has not managed to one-phase it, but they managed to. Oh, that was close. So Volzith does get killed for Method and A, who now grabs the eels on top of the pack that they had earlier. Fourty does need to deal with the rest of the transition, but I think they've already killed their trash. They're at 94% right now, so yeah, they have. It's going to be close. I think Method and A will still be able to grab this, but that was a close call there.
Yeah, that was definitely a big mistake by Method and A. If it would have been any closer, then Fourty would have gotten the lead here. But at this point, Fourty still has to finish off the boss, and they still have to do 6%. As we see, Wolf Disco just grabbing those eels, tricksing it to Rentari. Rentari dropping really low, so Method and A only has to finish this off. They still need 2%, so this might still be close, as Fourty probably only has to finish off those eels.
So Method and A, a bit miscalculation here right now, and Fourty trying to capitalize on this opportunity. I don't think they've pulled their eel pack just yet either. Loaf is proccing cheat death. Method and A doing whatever they can to desperately cleave these eel down. And there's a 5-second difference between the two teams right now. Method and A is finished, but 5 seconds on the clock for Fourty. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to pull it off here right now. And it looks like they're just a moment too slow as the timer does run out for the teams. And Method and A, woof. Official win, we were just told, Method and A here, but that was, that's not the same Method and A team that we just saw yesterday.
It definitely was not. It was a very close call after a number of tactical errors onto that one, Tettles. You just hate to see it, and that's not really what we're expecting from the team of this caliber.
Yeah, as Sowers would say, you hate to see that. That was, it just ended up being, it was just so many unconventional errors coming from the side of Method and A. They were the champions. We had seen them make some minor mistakes in the past, but the front half of this instance was actually very strong with them. They ended up pulling Windspeaker Heldus into Accuseer with a major, a really huge pull, and it's also showing off how Shrine of the Storm has turned into this mini boss instance, from what we actually did see last season. You also do see Nerf here pulling this Rune Carver too with this huge pull with Bloodlust here, just making sure that all those mobs get grouped up, and then then the issues start to occur for Method in A. Nerf ends up going down with this. I don't actually even know what happened. He actually ended up popping
the
shield
enforcer
wall.
popped.
Yeah, the enforcer
Four
popped
of
him.
them.
Yeah, he even had like Last Stand and Shield Wall rolling, and he still ended up dying to that. So like maybe he should have spell reflected the Deep Smash or something like that.
Just run away.
Even still, Method in A was still just like so far ahead because Fourty apparently had not practiced this dungeon as heavily. I know Lofus ended up saying like verbatim that they're going to do their weekly 10 Shrine of the Storm run like here, and they even still they ended up having a pretty good showing for what that even means from them.
I would love to be, because like Nerf's a great tank. He's very offensive based, and even for him to go double defensive trinket, he respects the danger of these dungeons. So I would love to see exactly what went wrong with his death there, because he had most of his defensive prop. You know, everybody's wearing the Edict trinket, and I wonder if maybe he forgot to change his Edict trinket to magic right before that Enforcer pull, because we know Enforcer's the biggest danger is the Deep Smash, which is a frost-based damage. So it might have been enough to keep him alive, but I mean, he dropped like a fly there.
He did. The Edict-based trinket, that's one of the newer trinkets from Eternal Palace?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, so it comes from Queen's Court, the 6th boss in the dungeon, and it's essentially a trinket that every 40 seconds provides a massive absorb on you of one type. So it's either physical or magic, but it's an on-use trinket, so you can control every 40 seconds which damage type you want to absorb. So, you know, for something like King's Rest, for instance, where he died as well, you could have physical absorb for the entire bridge with the Berserkers and their bleed, and as soon as you get to Shadow of Azul as an example, switch it to magic, because he's very dangerous with magic. So, you know, it's a new trinket, so maybe these tanks aren't used to playing it. Maybe he did do it there perfectly. It's hard to see exactly the absorb he got, but it's just something to keep in mind that this is actually a very versatile trinket. You can swap it throughout the dungeon. You do lose a bit of the absorb, which stacks over time if you keep the same damage type, but oftentimes it falls off between packs. So
good to know on that one. So with Method NA taking that last series, they're going to be moving on and waiting for the winners of our next one between Paint for Femme and No Girls Allowed. So